Taz Thornton has been there, done it, and seen it in ways that will make you change your view of the world and want to do better. As a high-flying corporate director, she appeared to have the world in her palm. Nobody could see her crumbling beneath the pinstripes. She rebuilt her back after breaking it at age 21, then fought back after the breakdown at 33 that saw her seeking wisdom from shamans and medicine people, as well as using everything in her NLP and coaching toolkit to reconstruct her life. That breakdown turned out to be Taz's breakthrough. And she's now impacting people far and wide as the UK's #1 inspirational breakthrough speaker, best-selling author, seminar leader, and coach. Taz's latest book, Unleash Your Awesome, touches on some of life's toughest experiences with tear-inducing honesty, provides real opportunities to learn and grow whatever life throws at us, and encourages us to stop moaning and start owning. Welcome to Liberate Your Authentic Self with Dr. Andrea Pennington, the prescription for living your life out loud. Well, Taz, I want to first thank you for being here with us at Liberate Your Authentic Self.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Absolute pleasure.
Yes. Well, I loved meeting you in London, and obviously we have a lot in common. Your whole concept of authenticity, integrity, encouraging people to meet the truth of who they are behind all of the masks, which I know you heard me share my story. This idea that you believe that we all have awesome power and potential, but we don't always know how to find it, feel it, and unleash it. I love it. So tell me about this mission you're on of Unleash Your Awesome.
Well, it's precisely that. I mean, I think we all have that connection when we're born. Yeah. And I think that gradually as we go through life, we become conditioned to turn it off. And I think for many of us, if you look at the shamanic cultures, when they talk about the shaman's death, and we talk about, to use Douglas Adams' words, the long dark tea towel of the soul, we all have them. And yet we have a choice then. When these difficult times hit us, I think we can either sink or we can step back from it and think, okay, I can wallow in this or I can use this. What is it here for? What is it here to teach me? And to be fair, it took me ignoring a hell of a lot of pebbles and a hell of a lot of boulders before the big stuff came and bowled me over. And I remember having this moment, or several, but the first of those moments I had that made me realize I should be doing something with it was when I broke my back. And I remember, lying flat on this hospital bed where I'd been for 9 hours with my head packed in sandbags and just thinking, I've got to do something with this. I can't just sit here and keep trying to escape from life.
But you were very young at that point. It's not like you were already in your corporate world, recognizing why am I over here in this pinstripe suit? How do you think that it was just the fact that you broke your back and you're laying there immobilized? Or do you think even as a young person, you had this sort of spiritual awareness?
I had a spiritual awareness from being this high. I was one of those weird kids that saw and sensed all the stuff the other kids weren't.
Me too.
One of those.
Me too.
Yeah, I know. I used to have this Mongolian-looking guy. So I cut my headphones there. This Mongolian-looking guy who used to float at the end of my bed when I was a kid. And I remember being very, very small. So I'd go. I remember having bunk beds, and I was an only child, but I wanted bunk beds so I could invite friends over. So sitting up, peeking over the covers, and this head of this smiling, what again to me now as an adult looked Mongolian, used to just sit there beneath the top bunk, just staring at me. And I used to hide. I'd pull up under the covers, and then I'd tentatively peek back up, and he was still there. And that happened several times. And I used to have several that would come and visit me. And when I was a kid,
did you ever tell anyone? Did you tell your parents or any adults?
I tried, yeah, absolutely. My mum was always quite spiritually aware. There's a bit of a kind of a psychic link going through our family, but I think I'm the first one that actually did anything with it. My mum's got it too. She's got natural healing ability, but she's a bit scared of it in case she does something wrong,
Oh, okay.
So it took me a long time, and I frequently used to talk about the things that I was seeing, the things I was sensing, even through into adulthood, and people would start coming to me if they wanted to know if somewhere had an entity. But yeah, it wasn't until I hit my kind of mid-20s that I started to do something with it. But when that car accident hit, that was in my early 20s. So I was kind of in corporate life, but not as high up as I ended up being. And I'd maneuvered myself into such a position that I felt backed against the wall. I was in an abusive relationship. I was coming to terms with the fact that actually I might like girls. Oh, how could I possibly? All that. Grew up in a very, very small-minded town.
Right.
And all of that hitting, and I didn't know a way out. So I came up with this master plan that seemed like such a wonderful idea at the time, that I didn't want to just go and kill myself, because I didn't want to leave that mess for people. I tried for months and months, and I've done so much work to undo this now. I used to sit and pray to get a terminal illness, honestly. So much work energetically to undo that now. So my plan was to take stupid risks every day. And if at the end of the day I was still here, my spiritual messed up mind at that time believed that somebody or something wanted me to be here. So that was how it happened. And when I got to that point when I broke my back, and lay there and thought, you idiot, you've probably trapped yourself even more, because clearly I'm okay. But when you see men in white coats talking spinal damage, I immediately went to, oh God, I'm going to be paralysed. Of course I wasn't. But that was such a brilliant spiritual ass kicking that was, do something. You're not seeing this stuff. You're not sensing this stuff. You're not the person that everybody opens up to and brings their problems to. That's not happening for no reason. So you can sink or you can swim, and actually then learn to dive and to fly and to do something with it. So it was always there, but I needed one of those epiphany moments we all talk about so glibly.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is part of our human nature that some of us, like me, some of us do have to hit rock bottom. We do have to have some painful experience that finally we feel like there is no other choice, the only choice is up. So I have so many questions. I've been dying for this interview for months, right? So, so much to explore, from the shamanism, the seeing entities, the spiritual pact that you must have made at a very early age. So, okay, where do I begin? So first, let's go back to that childhood thing. So you see this face of this Mongolian hovering, just under the upper bunk. And then you said that you saw others. Do you now, excuse me, do you now, in your adult wisdom, do you think they were spirits? Were they ghosts? Were they guardians, angels, or just people who were stuck? What do you think they were? Who they were?
For me, I don't so much see a division between them. For me, there's just energy. And from my worldview, and again, that's not to say that anybody else is wrong, but my belief is that kind of angels, spirits, energy beings, they're all part of the same body. And I think sometimes we as grounded human beings get far too hung up on trying to identify whether it's the ghost of Great Uncle George, rather than thinking, actually, the name isn't really important. What's important is the teaching. So if I look back now, though, the ones that I remember most fully, there was the Mongolian guy that used to float at the end of the bed. There was a guy with a white clerical collar who used to float sideways, kind of just below the ceiling level. And the other thing was, I always felt that one of these guardian spirits had a real connection. One of them really felt kind of sisterly to me, and I never saw her, but I used to sense her a lot. She'd move things, she'd hide things. When I was going through that abusive relationship, there was one particular time where he was being particularly verbally aggressive. And I remember he was standing in my mother's bathroom, and she had, those kind of celebratory things. Russ used to make them, I think, like a satin air balloon that had streamers hanging down. She had one of those hanging outside of the bathroom. And I remember that suddenly the streamers just started to blow. There were no drafts. And then Mum had lots of those mini travel shampoo bottles in her bathroom, and they started flying off the shelf at his head.
Whoa!
And I was like, whoa! And I felt that was again this sister entity. But it wasn't until I got probably into my teens that my mother admitted that I was supposed to be twins.
Oh my
And
gosh.
she'd always felt that my sister was there too.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
so she's been with me forever and a day. I affectionately refer to her as Poppy because that was one of my mum's other name choices. So Poppy was there from a very young age. And the others, she's the only one that's been constant. The others kind of gradually disappeared as I matured. I guess if I wanted to go and quest for them and speak to them, I probably could. But I haven't felt the need to, because since then other guardians have come in, other spirits who feel more appropriate for the now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I want to explore that because,
Yeah.
you know, when you talk about your breakdown to breakthrough, you
Mm-hmm.
went on a journey and you were seeing
Yeah.
shamans and curanderos or medicine people
Yeah.
and so on.
Yeah.
But before we get there, I want to talk about the other piece of that. So you had this childhood, you knew that you were kind of different than other kids. And
Yeah.
then you found yourself going down a path that, what was it, society? Was it your family that you felt like you needed to go in this well mainstreamed path? Because it sounds to me, when I read your book and I hear about the quote unquote depressive kind of feelings, like not wanting to be there, it seems like it was because of the choices that you made, or that whether it was pressure or whatever. How do you describe that?
It was classic square peg in a round hole. I grew up in a little village on the edge of a mining town, and it was one of those towns where, you know, even after the closure of all the coal mines, everyone still had that attitude. Or as a child, it seems that everyone still had that attitude of, well, you know, my dad was down the pits and my dad before him was down the pits, and it was good enough for me. And it felt that nobody wanted to get out of that. I mean, I grew up with, we had a family business when I was growing up. My dad was out a lot. He was a lorry driver as I was growing up, so he was in everything still together. I kind of grew up in a bubble, so it was a mix of own business, large family. My mum was one of 8, and so nothing much happened outside of the family because the family was so large. And when I got to school age, again, most of my peers grew up with, again, that small town mentality. You know, we were the ones who were worldly wise, because sometimes we'd go into Birmingham, which was a couple of hours away, and the other kids were just, you know, nearest town. That was such a long way if someone travelled sort of an hour to get somewhere. So I just don't think I realised there was anything else. I don't think I recognised there was anything else. And even when I was getting these strange things coming up, I remember the first time I saw a spirit outside of our house, and it was when we'd been to the ruins of a place in Norfolk. And I remember I was still at primary school, so still very, very young, and there was a tower there, and I saw this lady leaning out of the window of this tower with her arms folded, and I played up to high heavens that my mother and my aunt, who I was with, we needed to go up into that tower because there's a tall tower. It's exciting to a kid. I want to go up there. And then sister go up. Well, we must be able to because there's a lady in the window. And after much, you know, sleeve tugging, we got there, and the entrance was bricked up. And I remember going into school and writing about this experience and drawing a picture of this lady in the window. Wow. And I think the other parents thought it was a little bit odd. So, again, it was squashed down. My mother would encourage it. My mother, not encourage it, but would allow it. She never tried to close it down. I feel myself very lucky now that my parents never tried to squash it. They didn't try to grow it, but they never squashed it down. And I'm going off at a slight tangent now, but I do wonder if that's what happens with a lot of kids, that we all come into this world with the ability to see and to sense. And when our parents, our peers start telling us that things are silly, we switch them off.
Yeah.
So all of those times where we hear that someone's seen a spirit and then it's disappeared, has it disappeared, or have we just switched that part of our brain off? Mm-hmm. You know, things like that. So it was always there.
Yeah. Well, then what was your first experience with a shaman? And I know that you teach shamanism in some of your work, because, you know, I'm new to the world of shamanism. I think my first experience was maybe 11 or 10 years ago. But when I've spoken with different shamans, and I'm just back from Peru, having had an interesting ceremony or two.
I can imagine.
But they describe being able to see in other dimensions. You know, a Western person might call these other dimensions, these other realities. And they have said, yes, as a human, we do all have this ability to see into spirit worlds. So whether it's been switched off or deadened or we didn't trust it, in my case, I personally remember switching it off because I didn't know what to do with it. And it seemed kind of scary when I started to have psychic dreams, precognition, knowing things about people on the other side of the earth that I'm like, how should I know this? And when I felt like my soul was traveling, I was like, okay, maybe turn this off. Fortunately, I woke up and I'm able to use it again. But talk to me about what was that first step into the shamanic world for you?
Okay. So when I first started to explore spirituality a little bit more, when I got to the age that I could go to some of these kind of mind, body, spirit fairs and mediumistic nights and go and have readings and stuff, about 1 in every 3 readings I had with somebody, they'd want to train me. They'd tell me I had the gift. I don't believe anyone has a gift, or conversely, I believe we all have it. I don't think it's anything special. And I explored lots of different avenues. I looked into the whole kind of mediumistic route. It didn't feel right at the time. I've done a bit of training in it since because I believe in getting a wide view of things. I looked into spiritualist church. That didn't feel right. Nothing felt right until I was sitting at work one day, and this is a bit of a head melt moment. But the word shamanism started being dropped in my head, and I had no idea what it meant. Not a clue. It was the days before everyone had Google on their desktop. Imagine that now, not having Google at your fingertips. Yeah. So I had to go and research it. And then I found someone only a few miles from where I was working at the time in Kent who was offering these beginners classes in shamanism. And so at the time, in journalism, not paying for anything, for goodness sake, I get this free. Hello, can I come and report on this? Will you give me a free place? Yes, of course I will. So I was all set to go and do that. And then the universe intervened. I can only imagine it must have been the wrong teacher, because the week before I was due to attend, I was on a bus in the middle of London, and the bus was in an accident, and I was laid out with whiplash.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So, okay, that's not the right teacher then. So I just kept looking and kept searching for a while. And I got headhunted to go to another job in another part of the country. Now, I came over here to look at different houses, look at the areas, picked up a book in my local bookshop. It was a historical fiction book. Thought that's interesting. And then just before I moved over, I went to a literature festival, and the woman who'd written that book happened to be speaking there. Oh, well, I'll go and listen. And then it so happened when she was speaking that her career before becoming a full-time author tied into the business I was going to edit magazines for. Oh, well, I'm going to get a feature because that will score me some brownie points. So I arranged this, went to her house, and long story short, it became apparent that she was into the same kind of spirituality. And she said, I'm about to start teaching shamanism. Would you like to come and learn?
Oh, my
Okay,
gosh.
well, so bang, 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 bang. You know, sometimes things are too coincidental to actually be coincidences, aren't they?
Right.
So I went along, I started training with this lady, stayed there for about a year, and then circumstances changed, and I found another shamanic teacher that I ended up settling with, and he was amazing. He was a Danish guy. His name's Chris Lutterchow. And his story, in a nutshell, is that he wanted to learn about shamanism, and he started just traveling to the Americas and turning up on the reservations. And they'd keep kicking him off, and he'd just look around and look for odd jobs that needed to be done. So he'd just keep going and repairing things until eventually they realised he was serious, and they started to train him. So he spent years travelling and learning directly from people in the Americas until they said, go out and teach it. So that's who I ended up with. And then it got deeper when his assistant stepped down to get on with her own stuff, and he needed somebody else to assist it. And at the time I was in, I don't know, probably a 30, 40 strong circle of people. And everybody kept going, me, I want to do it. And I was the only one saying, I don't want to do that. I've got far too many responsibilities I'm holding down. I'm a director of a publishing company. I don't have time to do this. And he would keep coming back to me and saying, Taz, the spirit says it has to be you. No, I'm not doing it. And eventually, of course, I relented, and I did that for a while. And then I stepped back from that when my spirits kept telling me it was time to go and teach on my own. And I kept saying no. And it got to a really embarrassing crunch point where every time I sat down with him, I'd travel from here to the southwest. So he took in like a 4-hour car drive, and I'd be fine. I'd be wide awake. And the second he opened circle, it was like they switched me off and my head would drop and I'd start snoring. And it got so embarrassing. And the second circle was finished, I'd be awake again. And they just kept saying, you need to do your own stuff. You need to do your own stuff.
Yep, you were being called. So why do you think that is? So, typically when we think of a shaman, we think of these indigenous people. You talked about, someone traveling to the Americas, the Amazon, whatever. Why do you think people like you or like me who didn't grow up with these indigenous cultures, why do you think there's this draw, this call to shamanism?
Because I think all cultures were, if not shamanic, there would have been an element of animism in all cultures. So, the belief at the heart of shamanism that everything has an energy. And every indigenous culture across the land, including ours, would have at least practiced some form of animism. And I like to believe some form of shamanism. But if you look at the UK, the British Isles, of course, most of our spiritual history, our old ancient spiritual history, was wiped out with the coming of the Romans. And, it irritates me that still to this day in school we're taught about how these wonderful Romans came across and liberated us from our rowdy tribal brutality. And so, yeah, they gave us straight roads. We would have worked that out eventually, I'm fairly sure. What they actually did was eradicate our spiritual past. And if you look at our churches, as beautiful as they are, so many of them are built on the demolished ruins of our indigenous spiritual tribal bases.
And do you think that that impacted, the Romans transmitted that infectious spirit into the Brits? Because the English did kind of go and do the same thing in other places.
Absolutely.
Right?
Well, we learned, don't we? The abused became the abuser.
Yeah.
Oops, that's a bit of controversy there. I think it's there. I don't think we think far enough back when we think history. We're big on Victoriana over here, and if you look at the kind of Victoriana mentality, that's learned directly from the Romans. It's still the whole divide and conquer thing, and that's not me having a go at all people of Roman descent. It's not. It's just it's history, and we freely talk about things like the Trail of Tears, where the white man came in and demolished, and how terrible was that. And yet we don't stop to think that actually the same thing happened to our ancestors. We learned that, and it carries on and it carries through. So why are so many of us feeling that now? I think we're being called back to our original roots. And if you look at the book and the way all those stories came about, that was me working with my spirits and them saying, we have all this ancient wisdom and now is the time. Now it's time for it to come back up. So why is it now? Why are so many being pulled back? I don't know, but there are a core of people who are, over the past decade or so, I guess, being pulled back to our deep spiritual roots without all the BS attached.
Yes, without all the BS. I love it. I hate to even interrupt, but we need to take a quick break. And when we come back, I would like to talk about the book or books. We'll start one by one, because I think Whispers from the Earth is... I don't know, I feel like it's magical. So when we get back, let's talk more about that. Tune in daily to get fired up with insight and inspiration for purposeful living, conscious relationships, and soulful success. You're watching Liberate Your Authentic Self with me, Dr. Andrea Pennington. Check out the live version of this show, where I answer your questions in real time. Visit facebook.com/Dr. Andrea Pennington. So if you've ever been drawn to deep spiritual mysticism or even shamanism, you're going to love today's conversation. I'm sitting down talking with Taz Thornton. And in Taz's first book, Whispers from the Earth, she has a collection or an anthology of channeled teaching stories. And I loved digging into this book, Taz, because I did feel a sense of magic. So you have been visited by quote-unquote spirits since your childhood. when you were trying to break away and not do what the quote-unquote spirits were nudging you, urging you to do, things just started shutting down until you accepted, you relented, you said, okay. So tell me about how this book, how did it come about?
Okay, well, Whispers from the Earth was never going to be my first book. My first book was always going to be the one that turned into the second book. But when Spirit wants you to do something, there's no point turning a deaf ear. They will find a way. And for a while, I'd been getting these beautiful teaching stories in my meditations, in my journey work. And I guess if you look at my career, I'm a writer by trade. I was trained as a journalist. So stories have always been a great love of mine. I remember a few years back, a couple of years before I wrote the book, sitting at a gathering of shamanic people in the UK. And one of the speakers there was encouraging us all to take a kind of traditional story that we know and retell it in a shamanic way with a modern teaching. And it was such a beautiful exercise. I do it now with some of my own circles. But at the end of that, I was left wondering, where are our stories? Because we all hear of these rich indigenous teaching stories, from the Americas, from Australia, India, all over. Things like Jumping Mouse, How Raven Stole the Sun, all these beautiful, beautiful stories. And I thought, well, where are ours? What happened to them? And almost instantaneously, this voice that I recognise as being one of my guides, who would have been, I place her at kind of Bronze Age Britain, said, they're here. We've been waiting. We're ready to share these stories with you. And so I started journeying and meditating with the intent of, okay, give me a story.
What do you mean by journeying?
Journeying, so shamanic journeying, that for me is the area where shamanism differs to lots of the other spiritual paths. It's when you go into a trance state, usually by a drum beat or by movement or rattle. Or you can do it on the breath. And the shamanic belief is that you go into a deep trance state, and that allows your spirit to leave your body and go to other realms for teachings. So if I'm working shamanically, I will go into that trance state and I will journey to the lands where my guides are and go and work directly with them. Although I've been doing it for so long now that I can practically just say, okay, tell me, and they'll speak. So journey work. And as someone who's written for pretty much as long as I can remember, I thought I might get snippets and then have to, work with them, edit them and turn them into stories. But instead, what was happening is I was coming out with these fully formed stories, either in kind of a technical or movie format. I'm quite lucky there because my predominant sense is clairvoyance, so I'm quite visual. It's not like that for everyone with shamanism. Sometimes it's a sense, sometimes it's hearing. It depends what the predominant sense is. So I was coming out with these fully formed stories, either in kind of bardic form where I could recite them and write them down, or where I'd watched it play out and was able to write it down. I thought, well, this is quite exciting and a little bit odd.
Yeah.
So I started recording all of these stories because I've got into the habit of always recording my journeys anyway. And I was sitting there at my computer one day doing something boring. I forget what it was, probably something like spreadsheets or accounts or some kind of left brain work stuff. And again, this same voice dropped into my head and said, those stories you've been recording, you need to send them to a publisher. And I don't know if you ever get this, Andrea, but if you're really stuck in something and you're in kind of left brain work mode, I was in that, am I making this up? It sounds like it, but am I just projecting it?
Yeah.
So I did the kind of go away and working. And it was so persistent that eventually, on probably the 5th or 6th time of sending to a publisher, I downed tools and went, right, if this is real, tell me which publisher. And clear as a whistle, Moon Books popped into my head. And I thought, well, I've never heard of Moon Books. There's no such publisher. And by now, I've gone into sheer bloody mindedness. Right, I'm going to go. Oh, there is. And it's entirely that niche. Okay. So I cut and paste the stories that I had on my desktop. And there were probably only 2 or 3. I mean, you'll know with writing a book, you normally have to submit more than kind of 1,200 words. And it was about that. Whacked them on an email, and within about half an hour, I'd had a message back saying, we're really interested. Will you submit a proposal?
No way.
So I did that, sent through again, just this tiny amount of words that I'd written, And within a week, I got my first publishing deal.
Amazing.
And that's how it happened. And then I thought, can I take this further? So you've read the book, so you'll have seen there's a section at the back of stories channeled by other people. So I went to some of my kind of my shamanic students and said, look, try this, see if you can get stories. And the same thing happened with all of them, all coming back with fully formed stories with the most beautiful teachings woven between the words, and just wow. So that's how Whispers came to be. And now I've got to the point where they just pop in.
That's why I feel the magic. I feel the magic.
Thank you.
So I have to ask a question, that's something that's interesting. There was a debate while I was in Peru.
Okay.
Some people saying, shamanism is scary because if you go into a trance state and you leave your body, there could be these other entities who would love to get a hold of a human body. They don't exist on this realm, and if you leave, you're just giving them an invitation to take over. What do you think about that?
Well, that goes into the whole area of soul loss and walk-ins and soul retrievals. And of course, the core of shamanic healing work is this belief that all dis-ease has an energetic basis.
Yeah.
And those energetic illnesses often creep in if there's a bit of our own energy body missing. Now, without going too deep for the time that we have, in a lot of shamanic cultures, they believe you have more than one soul and they all have a different purpose. So even when you're journeying, you're not going to be empty. There's still kind of that soul fire holding you there. But I guess for me, the easiest way of answering that, and this is where I get so frustrated with so many people who kind of dabble without the right instruction, is that we can leave ourselves vulnerable. We do it a lot. It's why so many people in kind of Western world who don't have any spiritual connection or training are walking. Most people are walking around with soul loss to some degree and probably carrying things that aren't their own. But it's why, for me, it's so important to learn the basics of grounding, of shielding, of protecting, and of building really strong links with trusted spirit allies. It's
do we all have access to spirit allies?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
So take me back. Let's just say someone hasn't explored any spiritual path or shamanism. You just said grounding, shielding, protecting. Yeah. So if I am, just new to this whole thing, and I say, well, shoot, if you're saying that there really could be entities out there that could jump in if I'm in a low state, how do I ground, shield, and protect? Can you give us some practical tips?
Absolutely. Well, grounding is making sure that we have roots going deep, deep into the earth. So we can do that on our breath. We can imagine that there are roots going from inside our body all the way through the soles of our feet, deep, deep into the earth. And I like to see the roots not just going straight down, but lots of little offshoots going off to the side as well. So I'm well and truly anchored.
Yeah.
Shielding is really being aware of the aura, that energy egg that we all have around ourselves. And this is actually an interesting one. This is also where shamanism differs an awful lot from some of the more spiritualism or mediumistic based routes. When I trained in mediumship, there was part of me was really like, no, because of course one of the practices there is to open your aura up wide and invite spirits to step inside your energy field, and then you take the reading there. In shamanism, I would never, ever, ever do that, because I would never allow any spirits that I didn't trust to come inside my energy field. So in shamanism, we learn to work with that auric egg and to make sure it's the right distance away from us and it doesn't have any bumps or splits or spikes or cracks in it. And for me, for most people, the distance seems to be, if I turn to the side slightly, about here. And it's going to be
just around a foot.
Yeah, around a foot. And if you imagine the old TV screens, if you used to get really close to the TV, you could see the dots rather than the image. Yeah. So it's like that. If we pull our aura in too tight, for me, it becomes brittle. We can become trapped in a prison of our own making. Girl in the Stone House from the book. Yeah. If we breathe it out too far, then the edges become porous, like seeing all the dots on the old TV screen. So we need our aura to be at the right distance so that it's flexible enough to move with us and to allow in whatever we choose and will serve us, Not so far in that we become brittle, and absolutely not so far out that anything can just come in. Now, it depends who you speak to in shamanic tradition. Some will talk about if you are absolutely in your power and in your sovereign self, you shouldn't need to practice grounding and shielding. And some people will say that if you're practicing that much protection, then you're going to actually attract things. So we're saying, why do they need all that protection? Yeah. But for me, particularly when we're first starting, it's just good housekeeping. If we accept that we are all made of energy, lots of different energy particles, and, we learn that in science. We know that, we're energy. It makes sense that if we are traveling as an energy body, to at least keep all our own bits together and not go scattering ourselves everywhere.
Right.
So even from that point of view, for me, it's good housekeeping.
Yeah.
So grounding, shielding. I would sometimes have golden light, or I sometimes say liquid sunlight, coating the outside of that aura.
So it's more of a visualization. So you're just sort of saying, okay, let me imagine that I've got this golden shield around me.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the aura, are you just, once again, you're just sort of visualizing and imagining, okay, aura, stay kind of close, may you be all, perfectly shielded. I mean, what are we practically doing? Is it a visualization?
Visualization is great if people are predominantly visual, but I find a lot of people will say visualization and they'll say, I can't visualize anything. At which point I'll do the whole, okay, imagine you're cutting a lemon in half and now squeeze it. Take that lemon. Can you feel your mouth watering? And most people will get some sensation.
Yeah.
You can visualize. People grow up thinking they can't visualize. Probably if they've been told they're no good in art class at school or something. Anyway, we all carry these limiting beliefs. But it's sensing, visualizing, whatever feels right to the individual. And, there's that old trick where you can move your hands together until you start to feel some sort of resistance. Yeah. That's your aura. That's your energy field that you're feeling. So even at first, if you have to imagine, in whatever way you imagine, that you have this egg around you and that it's keeping you safe, that's a good way. And protecting, that's part of the same thing. Make sure your roots are down. Make sure your shield is there. And make sure you're not allowing anything in that shouldn't be. And the other thing is, for goodness sake, if you're going to try journeying, make sure that it's with someone who knows what they're doing. Or if you're going to go and do it to a CD or to a soundtrack, and hey, I have CDs, they can work well. Make sure that soundtrack has a callback beat, because most of them will journey to a drum beat, and they don't all have a callback. And frankly, it can be so nice to just sit in that other world where everything's sunny and you've got nice fluffy things with you. And it can be a bit of a wrench coming back here, so make sure there's a callback on whenever you use it.
All right. Well, there's another point that you brought up, and that is your sovereign self. So when we get back from the break, I want to hear how you define that and how we can ground ourselves in that sovereign self. You're watching Liberate Your Authentic Self with me, Dr. Andrea Pennington. Check me out on Instagram at Dr. Andrea Pennington. And now, back to the show. You know that this show is all about liberating your authentic self. Well, with me to give you just a whole nother perspective on how you can do just that is Taz Thornton. So Taz, before we went to break, you were talking about this sovereign self, and that if we are really grounded or identified with our sovereign self, we can feel that we are protected. We are protected.
Yep.
Yeah? So how do you define sovereign self, and how do we align with it? Okay.
Well, again, this is one of those things where there's a little bit of semantics and different people will have different ideas. But for me, sovereign self is kind of the same as our authentic selves, or as my teachers used to talk about, your spiritual warrior. So in a lot of the shamanic belief systems, or at least the way I was taught, there's two ways of being. You're either being a spiritual warrior or you're being a victim. And there's nothing in the middle. And for a lot in Western world, that can feel really, really unpalatable. So what? You mean everything in my life that doesn't feel right is my fault? Well, yeah, it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but until we accept that, we can't change things. So for me, sovereign self is kind of that spiritual warrior self where we've fully accepted responsibility for everything in our lives. We're at peace with that. We know who we are. That's key to so much. You know, one of my teachers, Chris, used to say that if you know who you are, warts and all, absolutely know yourself and love yourself, then the words and actions of others can't really hurt you because you know the truth of who you are. And that, for me, is fundamentally linked to this sovereign self state. It's an absolute knowing of who you are. It's an appreciation of who you are. And it's loving who you are. It's being aware of your strengths and weaknesses, if we use those corporate terms, and recognizing the teachings that come to us in all things, and even in the darkest place. If we can find the lessons in that and the teachings in that, well, suddenly it doesn't feel so dark anymore. So sovereign self is an absolute knowing of who we are, an absolute trust, a faith. And for me, an extension of that is having a good relationship with the spirits that you work with as well.
And how would you advise us to start interacting with spirits? Because you're grounded in your sovereign self. If someone's just starting out, could they be tricked? Could a spirit who's really dark and evil try to, front like they're a good spirit? How do we develop that sort of discernment? And how do we, invite these spirits to advise and be with us?
Well, you see, there's an interesting quick little segue as well. Is anything actually ever equal, or is it just different to us?
Okay.
So, there's, I don't know. I'm not really entirely sure on that one myself, but there are so many healing paths that are all about sending things to the light. Well, if we believe in elementals, in beings that are from other dimensions, what about shadow beings, for instance? I know for a fact that shadow beings exist. I've worked with them. I've moved some of them on. I've removed some from people. Sending someone who lives in a realm of shadows to the light would be hell. So we need to park our kind of conditioned, judgmental selves as well. And there are things that we say so easily, like, what's good, what's bad. And sometimes we need to just step back a little bit and, well, hold on. Is this just perspective? It's like when we talk about, terrorism and how evil that is, but how, and I know this is a bit of a tangent, but I find myself tripping up over that one as well, because if you've got a group of people who utterly believe that what they are doing is for the greater good, in the same way that we believe what we are doing for the greater good, how can we say either party's evil? They'll think we're evil, we think they're evil, and where on earth does evil exist in the first place? Or is it that we have just such different perspectives, and how on earth do you get through? But anyway, massive tangent. For me, the way to begin is with meditation. And so many people I meet get stuck on meditation and think they can't meditate. And it's because so many people have this idea that in order to meditate, we need to listen to whale song, sit cross-legged in a caftan and stare at a candle chanting Om. And of course, we don't. That
Right.
works for some. But for me, meditation is any time that you take out for yourself with no interruptions, purely with the purpose of getting to know yourself on a deeper level, calming down that monkey mind chatter and just being in the moment. So if you think you can't meditate, just readdress your definition of meditation. Yeah,
I'm with you on that one. I feel like you're right. This bias that is in the collective consciousness that meditation is either one, only for deeply spiritual people, or two, that you have to follow some rule-like process. And yes, there are processes, there are types of meditation that are incredibly effective for a variety of things. But I like to help people remember that if you really look at the definition of meditation, it's just putting your focus on an object. So whether that object is your breath, or it could be a candle, or it could be a mantra, or it could be your feelings. And every time your mind wanders, you just bring your mind back there. And so
you just notice.
Exactly. That's meditation. It's putting your focus on something, and when it wanders, you come back. And for the people that say, oh, I can't meditate, or I tried it once, again, here's a tangent. But I always ask them, I said, have you ever been in love? And since some people haven't, I say, well, have you ever been angry at someone? Someone that did something to you on the playground, at work, or cutting you off.
That pinpoint.
Exactly. And you were focused on it, and then you went and you did something else, and you brought your mind back, and you were in your head thinking of mean things that you would say, and that's meditation. You are bringing your attention to a single point, and every time your mind wanders, you come right back again. And we do it in love, right? I'm supposed to be at work, but now I'm just thinking about my beloved. That's meditation. You're meditating.
Or I'm supposed to be at work, but I'm playing solitaire. That's meditation too. Not so healthy. But yeah, that's exactly it. We have all these ideas about things. We have all these cliches that we put on things. I mean, there's a pal of mine who was talking on social media on one of the kind of hippie shit threads I had going, and he put something about tie bells and joss sticks, and he's a great guy, but he's much more left brain than he thinks. He's much more left brain than I am. Actually, we have a very similar message, and every time he'll hit this, that's okay if you want to just think tinging your tie bells is going to get rid of everything. It's not. And if you look at what amazes me is if you look at so many of today's kind of up and coming or popular motivational speakers, they're all talking about the stuff that you and I talk about.
Exactly.
They're all talking about it in the mainstream. Look at how big mindfulness has become.
Yes.
Oh, seriously, that's hippie shit. It's just that we've created an acceptable modern public face for it. Businesses are bringing in mindfulness, but they wouldn't think of doing meditation. Actually, right. Some do now.
Yeah.
But it's there. And the other thing people fall down on is they think they have to get to that state of nothing.
Yeah.
That complete. I got that once and thought, yeah, I've done it. Oh.
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah. So how would you advise someone to start who may have been resistant or felt like, I can't, it's boring, my mind wanders, I fidget, I think of other things. How would you advise them to get started with meditation?
It depends what's going to light a candle for them. You don't need to light a candle. A lot of people start with a meditation CD. That can work well if they have a guided meditation. But if even that feels a bit too hippie for you, one of the simplest ways is to put on your favourite album. But instead of singing or dancing to it, just really think about the words that are being sung. Listen to the words. Be in it. One of the core principles of shamanism, again, in the way that I was taught, is this idea of the first attention. And that means that whatever we're doing, we should give it our full attention. It's the antithesis of multitasking. You can only really give one thing 100% of your attention at any one time. And if people are in business and are feeling overloaded and their boss keeps throwing more, I sometimes say, well, just ask them to stop and ask them which of these tasks they'd like you to give less than 100% of your attention to. Because there is only 100%. Okay, so you want me to give 70% there and 20% on this one and just 10% on that one? Is that what? No, I want you to give them, point out. Sometimes we need to point out the obvious to people. So that in itself, that whole concept of being fully present and giving 100% of your attention to whatever else you're doing, that in itself can be a meditative state. So if I'm running a meditation circle and we're running a talking stick round, which again comes from indigenous culture, so we have a stick, and I've used a biro in boardrooms for it. You can use anything, and the idea is that whoever is holding the stick is empowered to speak from the heart, and they're the only one who is allowed to speak. You can't speak until the stick makes its way around to you.
Right.
That can be a meditation. Learning to listen, and that thing with listening to your favourite album, for instance, that can be a meditation in learning to listen, because we don't. We think that we have two ears and therefore we're listening. But when we say we're listening, normally we've got just enough of our attention on that conversation to think, oh, how can I compete with that? Or, oh, have I been on holiday somewhere better? Or what happened in my childhood where I can comment on that? And the rest of your mind is on, did I remember to take the chicken out of the freezer?
Right.
Oh, I forgot to send the kids to lunch with their lunch boxes today. Or all those things, we get distracted. Whereas that can be, I say it's simple, learning to listen holistically and fully can be one of the most powerful and difficult things that we can do. But just learning to listen can be a step into meditation for me. I don't care whether you're listening to an album, whether you're watching TV, whether you're writing, whether you're working, whether you're talking to you on this, be there, do it 100%. And that practice can be a step into meditation.
Yes.
But yeah, meditation can be anything so long as you've dedicated it to that purpose.
To being fully present and aware. Well, I, as you know, I have adopted one of your hashtags. One that I absolutely love. You're like, Andrea, quit saying that this is new agey, this, whatever. It's not woo woo. It's hashtag hippie shit.
Hippie shit.
So talk to me about this upcoming book.
Okay. Unleash Your Awesome.
No, I thought your next book is going to be
book
hippie
4.
shit. Yeah,
That's
hippie
book
shit.
4. Okay, hippie shit. So first one's Whispers. Second one that's out in September is Unleash Your Awesome. Third one is More Whispers from the Earth, because that one's been so popular they've asked to do more. And the fourth one will be Hippie Shit, which has been optioned, but I haven't started writing it yet.
Okay, you haven't
I'm writing
started.
it in here at the moment.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And the way Hippie Shit came about is because once I got over myself, when I first escaped corporate life, I went into this bubble of, no, I'm not doing anything corporate again. I'm just going to teach my shamanism and spirituality because, corporate life is full of so much plastic stuff. And eventually, of course, I realised that more and more people were coming to my workshops who happen to also come from a corporate background and say, well, you bring that in there. So it was only a couple of years ago that I started operating under Taz Thornton rather than my Firechild Shamanism brand. Oh. And that's where Unleash Your Awesome came into being as my kind of hashtag, and all my workshops start with Unleash Your Awesome. And because I was mixing in more and more of a business community, I do a lot of business networking now, and now I step into my power and happily talk about all my woo-woo stuff. But people started dismissing it as hippie shit. So I sat back for a minute, and again, I could have gone into victim. I could have gone into, I'm not welcome here, I don't fit, they don't understand me. Or I could say, screw that, I'm going to take that and I'm going to claim it as my own.
Yes.
So I took hippie shit and turned it into my own hashtag, and now when I'm talking about my other stuff in business settings, I call it hippie shit.
I love
and every
it.
now and then, someone who's into this same sphere will come to me and say, no, stop. You're degrading it. Stop calling it hippie shit. No, I'm not. What I'm actually doing is reclaiming it and creating a filter so that straight away, if people aren't interested in that, off you go then. Exactly. But the amount of people who get drawn in when they say, oh, I like hippie shit.
Yeah.
It's created this kind of jokey element.
Yes.
Go for it.
I have done the same thing. So for a moment, I was influenced by your comment when I was speaking in London. And it's funny because I very carefully, deliberately, and consciously crafted my presentation at Expert Empires, and I seeded it with some very specific words, like you're saying, so that my tribe would recognize, right? Yeah. And then you said, hey, come on, this isn't new age, this isn't woo-woo, just call it what it is. This is ancient wisdom. And I said, you know what, she's right. Let me quit with the disclaimers. Now, I will say I'm no longer using disclaimers, but just like you, I have decided to reclaim and rebrand and re-energize woo-woo. And in fact, I'm calling it the woo-woo element, because there is an element of woo in everyone. Like even people who say, well, I think it was just a coincidence. I can't really explain it. Well, then I can tell them, hey, that's the woo-woo element. Because of my scientific background, I feel like, it's like an element on the periodic chart.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yes, I'm all about reclaiming some of these phrases and terms and letting the people know that, you know what, let's demystify it. Let's reclaim it and rebrand it. Well, Taz, this has been such a fun conversation. I think the next time we will talk more about Unleash Your Awesome. And then we'll do another one about the hashtag hippie shit once you start writing that. I love that people can actually work with you one-on-one. So in addition to the workshops that you're doing in the UK, the Unleash Your Awesome, events, people can actually book a power hour and do some one-to-one coaching sessions with you, yeah?
They can, yeah, absolutely. And that can be about whether someone has one particular block or something they want to get past, even if it's something from a business point of view and they want to tap into their authenticity to get more visibility, which is, again, where the hippie shit comes into business, because the reason we're not tuning in is there's too much being flung at us. The way you cut through the noise is you speak from here and from here. That's what you do. So a power hour session is where we concentrate on usually one issue and we drill down and we get to the bottom of it. And most times people, actually 100% of the times thus far, people have walked away smiling, feeling more empowered, and with a set of tools that they can then take into the rest of their lives. once they've finished speaking to me, it's up to them what they do with it. But if they use it, it can absolutely change their lives for them.
I love it, love it, love it, love it.
Thank you.
So where can we find you online?
Everywhere. You can find me on Facebook, which is Taz Thornton Official. You can find me on Instagram, Taz Thornton. You can find me on tazthornton.com. If you search for Taz Thornton, you'll find me on most of the social media channels. So just get in touch. I always welcome people saying hello and coming and having a chat. So do so.
Wonderful. Well, I will put links to all of your social media profiles and your website in the description. So Taz, I just want to thank you and honor you for the contribution to, you know, the hippie shit movement. I love what you're doing, and I'm glad that we are connected now.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that this has helped you open up your mind and your eyes to a new perspective of how you can tap into your authentic self and unleash your awesome. I want to remind you that you are a gift to the world. So share your presence with passion. And until next time, may you be free from suffering. May you be truly well in body, mind, and heart. And may you be truly happy. Much love. Bye. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Dr. Andrea. And did you know I'm on the radio daily? Visit AmericaOutloud.com to download the Talk Radio app.